following presentation is rated PG and may contain coarse language and mature themes. Viewer discretion is advised.
I think sometimes as addicts, we separate ourselves into the part of ourselves that we don't want to be anymore. And I think for me, the reframe is always, all of this is part of you. All of it is an essential part of who you are. And the greatest things that I've had in my life are because of my failings and this struggle with addiction and how I have reframed my relationship to it. And so I'm not trying to erase any of myself.
I'm Peter Anthony, and I'm inviting you to join me with friends old and new who have battled substance abuse disorder and have come out clean on the other side. What's it take to kick drugs and alcohol, and what's it like living the sober life? Find out right here on Recovery Road.
Hi, I'm Nikki. I'm a recovered drug addict and alcoholic. Altogether, it's been 12 years now. I remember being like 10, maybe 11 or 12, and coming across this like pass out game where you would do these things and you would be able to make yourselves faint and pass out. And I remember having these like experiences when you would faint that were just an escape from reality. Sometimes you would have hallucinations or you'd have this full body experience. And in years later, you know, looking back on my escapism and some of what has led me to be an addict, I think back to that as being kind of a pivotal moment where I chased this idea of escaping the waking world and myself and who I was in it. I talk very openly now about my relationship to my identity, both as someone who identifies as queer, which I still haven't even reckoned with what that means to me or what it means with me in the world. Someone who holds obviously a marginalized identity, a racial identity, and you know, growing up without any understanding or space to talk about those aspects of myself, and yet also being very singular and alone in spaces. I remember just the world being really overwhelming and being really isolated in it. And any opportunity to escape, which is why I think I love stories so much, was really a big part of my life. I never really had the ability to regulate my consumption. It was always extremes for me. You know, it was really easy to get caught up in overconsumption and always black out drunk. I always got to that point where I disappeared and that other person was the one that was making decisions and interacting with people, sometimes in really, you know, negative and unfortunate ways. But, you know, alcohol is also very socially acceptable, so it was very easy to access. It was very easy to make an excuse that I was just doing what everyone else was doing. When I transitioned from alcohol to drugs, part of it was that I felt like I could control that behavior a little more. I certainly couldn't control my use, but my behavior was far less unhinged. You know, you don't really see the kind of behavior when you're using, you know, narcotics or methamphetamines as you do when you're over-consuming alcohol, especially at that age. But it's really, like anybody knows, it's this swinging pendulum that never stops. There's no way to stick your hand into that movement and stop it unless you absolutely stop consuming drugs and alcohol, which is, you know, or at least that's the way it was for me. I really equated those moments of high, whether I glimpse them with alcohol or, you know, most commonly glimpse them with narcotics, of like, you feel sometimes like you're seeing the fabric of the universe, that you're getting a glimpse at God. And I remember so badly in my life wanting to believe that things were miraculous. And that search was all-consuming because it felt fundamental to my happiness and to a sense that I belonged here. And so there was really, like, that was an unrelenting force for me. And people who know me, they're always amazed by sort of how I accomplish things and how I make things happen. But that drive really went into finding and consuming substances when I was young. I was an addict for a long time before I knew I was an addict. I was just on the path of consumption and, you know, I'd lost everything. I'd, like many addicts, done so many awful things and I was so alone and devastated. And I remember something happened and there was like this moment where the people I was around, there was this moment of betrayal. And I just realized this is all you have left, are people that couldn't care less about your well-being. And for the first time in a long time, I felt something. I was so furious and so angry that I just decided in that moment I wasn't going to be a prisoner anymore and I wasn't going to consume drugs anymore. And I had this feeling inside me, and it wasn't necessarily true in the world, but I felt something break, this chain, and I just realized that it was actually my choice in that moment. I struggled and secretly for a long time to recover from that addiction. And unfortunately, went to university where alcohol is very socially acceptable, so in some ways moved from one into the next. But getting out of that first addiction, which, to be honest, I knew that I was very close to moving towards using needles in order to chase the kind of highs that I needed. And I was absolutely certain that I was gonna die. I knew it was gonna kill me, and I just didn't wanna die like that. There was something in me that understood this great big thing I'm supposed to do with my life. I hadn't fulfilled it. And the not fulfilling it, which is what breaks me so often and still does sometimes, and what led me to surrender to addiction, I just realized I still wanted to know what it was. And so that's part of what propelled me out of that time. The moment isn't the moment. The moment is the last moment of a thread, right? And so it started 2 years before. My father, who was a lot like me, and we were very close. I was a daddy's girl. On my 31st birthday, he was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And we had 3 months to that day until he was gone. When my father passed, I was very fortunate that I got to be with him in the room. And it was the single most heartbreaking moment of my life. But it was also the most spiritually profound. It altered me. I actually, even as a writer, can't put into words how it altered me, but that miracle, that certainty that the world was miraculous, that was it in that moment. And it was so strange for it to be the worst moment of my life, but to also be this moment that, again, liberated me. I still struggled for those next couple years, but that moment kept showing up, almost like a question. Are you gonna remember that I happened? And are you gonna do something about it? And finally, I had this one episode of drinking and fights and stupid, awful behavior. And I realized that, again, I was gonna lose everything. I had this partner that I loved with this beautiful home. And it was just do you wanna be the person telling the story about what you used to have? Or do you wanna be the person deciding what it is you're gonna be? And I just, again, had that moment where I was like, this is up to you what you're gonna do with your life, and if you're gonna be part of the miracle, or if you're gonna be determined not to see it. That was actually, getting clean, finding yoga, hugely transformational moment in my life, changing the way I eat, and just deciding, honestly, to stop being afraid, because I think the biggest, or one of the parts of my addiction, was the fear of trying, because what happens if it doesn't work, or what happens if you fail? And I sort of decided I was just going to try to be courageous as much as I possibly could, and that's what I've been doing ever since.
I want to bring us to the point when you quit narcotics.
Yeah.
You talked about just the day where you're like, I'm done.
Yeah.
Did you go to meetings? Did you get help? How did that process start?
I really wish I had gotten help. I think between being fiercely independent and ashamed and, just fiery, determined to show people, especially my family, who I felt a little had abandoned me, which isn't necessarily true, but that's how I felt. And so I think I just really leaned into this desire to just do it all on my own. I would love to know what the story of me recovering is with help, but I don't.
Moving ahead to when you quit drinking alcohol.
Yeah.
Same situation, you cold turkey, solo.
Yeah.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah, I think like as an extremist, I like to equate it to the fact I do everything like 1,000%.
Yeah.
You know, and even worse, I actually went on an all-inclusive trip within like 2 or 3 weeks of that.
Wow.
And so I really think part of it, you know, if I'm being honest, is not just about being strong and resilient. I think sometimes it can be about punishment and about thinking that I didn't deserve help or to be supported or saved.
Can you
Yeah.
tell me about some of the things you work on, some of the art you create? I just want to know how drugs and alcohol got in the way of that, and how when you quit, the door opened a little bit.
I've developed this idea of my addiction and how it really numbed that creative edge, my ability to dive obsessively into stories. And I've reframed this idea that, you know, what a gift it is to be an addict, because it means that as someone who's clean, my entire interpretation of the world is without it being dulled. And I always have the energy and capacity to create, which I wouldn't if I was still using. And so to me, I'm really grateful I'm an addict. It doesn't erase any of the darkness or the unfortunate aspects of what I've been through, but I really feel grateful that I've had these limitations and all the things it's opened up for me.
I know you've been teaching yoga for how long now?
A decade.
A decade?
A decade.
So I told you, I just started doing yoga
Yeah.
about 6 months ago.
Step your right foot back like a leg length and a half. And you're gonna like plant your right foot on like a 45-degree angle. So it's warrior one. Yeah. So square your shoulders forwards, bend that front knee just a little bit. And then I want you to sweep your arms up and forwards, take your palms forward, spread your fingers wide. And when you empty your lungs, I want you to cactus your arms, widen through your heart, lift your chin, expand. Good. And then on an inhale, just reach for the sky. And do that again. So you're gonna take up space, cactus the arms. You might even like fly the arms open. Good. Do that one more time. Big breath in, little deeper bend in that front knee. Good. Exhale, fly the arms, expand. Good. And then release the arms. Straighten your front leg. Step your feet together.
Wow, I feel like I could lift a tree.
That was awesome.
Cheers. Thank you, Nikki.
You are welcome.
The door opened when you stopped drugs and alcohol for your
Yeah.
art. Did it also open in terms of how you feel in the world? You mentioned earlier your identity, who you are, your
Yeah.
sexuality. Did all of that open up for you as well? And was the drugs and alcohol muting that?
For me, it comes back to finally recognizing that to be courageous in my life, I have to be present in my life. I needed to be brave enough to be myself, to speak my identity out loud, to be curious around who I am. And all of it has unfolded over the last 10 or 12 years. None of it's been instantaneous. But again, if I was dulling myself, you know, if I was getting caught up in addiction or not really being present in my life, I wouldn't bother. I'd still be numbing this great big fear of facing myself. And instead now I get to be curious around it and I get to look at myself. It's delightful. I don't need to run away from it. Even the ugly parts of it are part of what have made me what I am.